welcome to this episode of the Your Day, Your Rules podcast. I'm Michael.
And I'm Sev, and you're about to listen to some provocative chat about the frustrations many of us feel at work.
Offering practical tips to reach your authentic potential and insights gained from our professional experience.
Whatever your background, come and join us at a secret water cooler conversation.
Let's begin. So Sev, in the last episode, we mentioned we were going to discuss masking and conformity in the workplace during the early parts of our careers and how our early childhood experiences had helped create a mindset that we took into our careers with us. What was that like?
Well, interestingly, I would say that I sort of, like I said, I had that confidence to sort of drive my way through and find out and explore. It was like I had a thirst to just try and explore things and see what it was like, etc. And it was really the first time where I had that sensation of, well, what are you doing here? Sort of feelings that triggered me almost. It was a trigger point of oh, okay, I have to behave, I have to conform, I have to be a
Yeah.
certain way. And it's apparent to me now, reflecting back on things, that there were all these little microaggressions that sort of triggered me to become or put on a facade or a face or a mask of who I thought I needed to be, just so that I felt safe and like I was okay where I was, essentially.
Did it feel like you were under siege or you were locked in this perpetual struggle?
Always. It was kind of like, the thing that always sort of I'm reminded about is whoever I met in either a club or a new workplace. It was sort of, oh, so where are you from? And then it was always followed up with, well, but where are you really from? And, I'm sure in some instances there wasn't anything negative in that. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe they were trying to find out, and learn about stuff, or it was just interesting to them because I hadn't been exposed to it before. I mean, we are talking back in the 90s here, right? So, but it was a trigger to feeling like, oh, I'm being questioned. Oh, I've been picked up. The person who doesn't belong is in the place.
And the radar goes up.
Exactly. And I think it's really unsettling as a young person when you're going through those things, because naturally, I suppose, behaving in ways that allows you to maintain safety and conformity, and like you're not going to be the one that's sticking out. As much as I had this loving feeling of, let's go, I'm here, I'm ready, let's go and do this, I'm rolling up my sleeves. At some point, somewhere along the line, these were the experiences that, from an external point of view, that kept beating me down. And eventually I got to a place where I was tired, I think, and I just went with who I thought I needed to be, so I wouldn't, that energy dialed down.
It's like armour that you put on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was exhausting because I even remember, this was carrying on when I was was freshly married, and I'd come home and I'd have no energy for my husband, and he would be like, "What's wrong? What's going on? You seem to be all right out there, but when you come home, it's sort of like you've got no energy." It's like, I'm exhausted from being someone else.
So you entered into the workplace with this real sense of excitement and enthusiasm, and this is going to be a great experience. And then slowly over time, what experiences started to chip away at that?
It beats you down. And I'd love to be able to say it was a learning curve and you just learn from your past mistakes. And I did think that for a while, but actually they're not past mistakes. They were just who I was and who I wanted to be. I wanted to bring my whole self into that. I didn't want to bring one version of me. I remember doing a diversity and inclusivity quiz, and I was only like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and I put down, I bring the whitest version of me to work.
Right.
Because I was still doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that, Sev. But the whole Sev is like, there's so much more to me than that. And I think I was actually robbing myself of that chance to show people and share with people, and they were kind of missing out as well. So reflecting back, that's how that went. But what about you, Michael? How was it for you?
For me, I mean, it was a similar case of I was excited about the journey I thought I was going to undertake, but I also had a real sense of trepidation because, as I mentioned in the previous episode, at university, I felt this sense of displacement that although I may have had sort of the intellectual capability to hold my own, there were very much parts of the cultural makeup of myself that were lacking or missing, and I felt I was going to get caught out. And it was really this case of running on a treadmill, trying to keep ahead of people and get as much or absorb as much knowledge as I can.
Mm.
And sort of the profession I went into it is quite rigid and it's quite sort of old school in its mentality. I think things are changing for the better now and have been for a number of years. But at that point, it was very much about fitting in. You follow what everybody else has done. And when you see sort of leaders at the top of the profession who are very powerful, persuasive people, and they've had to be project an image to do that, I think the natural inclination when you're quite young and fresh is like, "Oh, that's who I have to be."
That's what I'm gonna model myself on,
Yeah, yeah.
and almost pretend to be like that until I am that.
Yeah, fake it till you make it. And I don't wanna sort of dismiss fake it till you make it because I think it's a legitimate strategy. It's a legitimate strategy for you to buy yourself time, and you're not the finished product when you start off your career. I mean, how can you be? You're you're a work in progress, and you're something that is going to grow, and you're gonna expand, and you're gonna become more than you were before. But that process of growth gets st I found got stifled because you can't bring your whole self to the meeting, or you can't bring your whole self to work.
Yeah, and what are you growing? You're not growing you, you're growing, like, a fake part of you or a version of you almost. It's kind of like,
It's an avatar of you.
yeah.
So the I don't know if you've had this experience where you meet somebody outside of work, and it's like a whole new person has showed up. It's like, "Who's this dude?
Oh, I
This dude is not
know.
at work."
I was that dude.
Yeah.
I was I'd never forget, I was out at a music festival and it was, like, really cool hip hop and I was, dancing away and, anyone who knows me knows that I love to have a boogie and I was dancing away and singing all the lyrics and all of that, and then, the work colleague just kind of went by and was like, "Who are you?"
Who is this crazy woman dancing in front of me?
And it was kind of like, "I've been found out!" It
I'm
was,
so busted here.
yeah, exactly. And it's kind of it's kind of annoying and saddening to reflect back on that and think, why did I have to be like that? But
Yeah.
but and you know what else is really interesting is, okay, so from an external point of view, and I've talked about this a lot, there are pressures that come from your external environment that you actually have no control over. And if they're sort of forming perceptions of you and think that you belong in a corner or at the back of the bus or whatever,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing, there's only a certain amount that you can do about that as and when. There's a time and place
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can also push against it. But also, that whole thing where you say, you needed to fit in and you're kind of modeling yourself on the leaders, etc. That was you. No one told you to do that. That was you that did that,
Yeah.
So
It
when
was a
I
choice I made.
exactly. And so when we think about it, like I want to tell my kids, just like, yeah, good to have mentors, absolutely magpie stuff. That's what it's there for. Take something that's already there and make it better, but also make it better, but make it you, make it yours.
Yeah.
Put your stamp on it, be you.
But that takes a certain amount of courage, and it also it's much easier to go through that process if you've got security behind you.
100%.
So if you can just leave your job at the drop of a hat and say, "Well, actually, I'm not doing this. I mean, why are you expecting me to do this?" You're in a much stronger position than if you've got a wife and you've got a kids, or you don't have mummy and the bank of mummy and daddy,
Yeah.
you know,
Some sort
propping
of
you up.
security blanket to fall
Yeah,
back on at the end of the day, right?
and given our backgrounds and the scarcity mentality that we mentioned previously, and that fixation on security, what you will do is you will constantly at work feel that you have to compromise who you are with what needs to be done to get ahead. And I did it. I think everybody to some degree
Oh,
plays the
yeah.
game.
We all did it. Absolutely.
Unless you're going to go out on your own, set up your own business, set it up by your own rules. At some point, you have to play the game, and you have to learn to play it well if you want to succeed. But then there's the cost of that. You do put on a mask. You do put on a, or you create this avatar of yourself, which hopefully actually aligns with who you truly are inside. But a lot of the time, if the environment isn't inclusive, all that you're doing is creating an avatar of somebody else. You're taking on somebody else's hopes, somebody else's dreams, somebody else's values, and placing them on yourself. And no matter how good an actor you are, or no matter how you try to sort of quieten those voices down, eventually you can't bury them forever. They will come
No,
to the surface.
because you'll be found out at some music festival
Yeah.
dancing around.
And then and then the day of reckoning comes. But that's a very stressful and anxiety-ridden place to be at for a long period of time.
It really is. It really is. And you know, from a personal point of view, it that drove me to seeking medical help. That was, the first time
You
where
and
I actually had to go to
hundreds
the
of
doctors
people.
and say, "Help me," because I think I might be depressed.
Yeah,
And it was because I was trying to be someone who I wasn't, 100% of the time, and it was exhausting,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah. It pays you to get comfortable with that level of discomfort because any success that you gain will mean that you are exposing yourself on a routine basis to levels of stress or levels of misalignment with who you are or feelings like I can't do this. This is very much outside my knowledge. And you'll have to do that over and over and over again
Yeah,
and
definitely.
becoming comfortable with that. But then also what that does is lead to profound levels of stress. And I think that's what is often overlooked in the workplace. That when you're having to play a role and when you have all these sort of underlying worries in the back of your mind, that they start accumulating over time. So even like, it's even something innocuous like, where are you really from? On the face of it, it's just a very innocent question that somebody's curious about you. But what the signal is, well, you don't quite belong here.
Mm,
What are you doing here?
absolutely.
And then when you face that on a daily basis,
It
it
builds up.
it builds and it builds and it builds. So all these tiny things which might not seem, huge on the face of it, these microaggressions actually have a or can have a very meaningful impact on you and your health unless you build up some level of psychic defense to it. And sometimes you have to do that because you're in no financial position to just say, well, stuff this job.
Yeah,
You and your company can sling your hook because you've got responsibilities and you have to quieten down that voice, but you can't quieten down that voice forever. And I think, particularly when you're in the early parts of your career, I know for me, I just took anything that was given to me. It was right. Okay, Michael, here's this project, or Michael, do this.
yeah. And, I don't necessarily regret all of the projects or the extra bits that I took on because I think it proved to myself that I do have a great work ethic and it allowed me to grow from discomfort in terms
Yeah,
of juggling so many plates and so many different projects and extending to, you know, being a creative one day and then analyzing data the next sort of thing. So it really allowed me to stretch.
yeah,
But I think overall, doing lots of work doesn't necessarily mean that people will respect you. So you
absolutely.
need to sort of
Yeah,
teach people almost how to treat you
yeah,
and and go from there. And just because you say no to something, as long as you position it in a way where you're being, you can't just say no to everything, obviously, especially when you're starting
when you're
out.
young, and
Yeah, it's
yeah,
a learning journey, but at the same time you want to be able to make your values and your goals very clear to your mentors and your managers so that they understand where you're heading and why you're choosing to say no to certain
yeah,
projects.
yeah,
And if anything, that gives others an opportunity to actually get stuck in other ways, doesn't it?
yeah.
Because you're giving somebody else a chance
Yeah,
to.
you're giving them the ability to perhaps expand out of their comfort zone, whereas you would have taken it on to begin with.
I think a really important skill to kind of master early on is that time management, I believe, because if you're able to justify not being able to take something else on because there's only 24 hours in the day and everybody has the same amount of hours in a
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
If you're able to sort of justify to your manager, "Look, yeah, I can absolutely take that on, but it does mean that something has to drop
yeah,
because this is where I'm at."
yeah,
And the only way you can really have that conversation in a justifiable manner is if you are managing your time really well and you can show them that.
Yeah.
So I wish, I'd like to think that I was always really good at managing my time. However, maybe having that brave conversation wasn't something that I was willing to do in my early 20s.
Yeah, and again, part of this is it comes from your background. If you have grown up in an environment where you have been taught those skills or you've absorbed those skills, you've seen your parents do it, you've seen your parents being in a quite a powerful position to make decisions and have other people follow what they say. You absorb this idea that actually what I have to say is important and meaningful, and I do have the right to say this. Whereas if you haven't had that, again, it's very much keep your head down, get on with it, and as I said in, the previous episode about having to work twice as hard to justify being in the same position, if you're still running that mental model, you will say it yes to everything
Mhm.
because your mental model is, well, I have to do this much more to get to the same position. I can't say no to this.
It's proving yourself again and again and again sort
Yeah.
of thing. And it's funny because I actually operated like that for a really long time where I thought if I just continually prove my value, if I just continually take on more and show them how, I would be a huge loss to them. Someone one day will appreciate that and they will then reward me for
Yeah.
all of my hard work.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens. I would say a lot of the time people are so stuck in their own heads
Yeah.
that they're probably not gonna necessarily see that.
Even register it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, what do you do, Michael? What would you say to your younger self in that aspect in terms of making life choices around? Are you gonna take on lots and lots, or are you gonna choose and sift and sort through?
I looking back on it, I would definitely sift and sort to the things that aligned with really where I wanted to go, where I wanted to travel. Because the idea that competency alone or doing a huge amount alone is enough to get you very far, I think is misguided. It isn't. And as you said, lots of managers or lots of people in senior leadership positions are so busy and have got so much going on of their own that fair enough, you're making their life easier, but they don't think of you in a way that, oh, he's a leader or he's got leadership potential. He's got real presence. It's just, oh, he gets the work done. Great. And but the problem is if you get the work done, you get locked into a certain position. Oh, he's good at this, this, and this.
Mm,
I'll give him that.
and he's a doer.
And he's a doer. But then the parts of the I don't know, the work pie that is progressive to your career gets left to the side. You get the little crumbs, but you don't get the stuff that gives you. We'll probably discuss this in further episodes. That executive presence, or oh, he's CEO material because investors will look at him and think, oh, he's the guy.
Mm,
Yeah, I've got confidence in him because he presents in a certain way, or he's built up a certain level of experience or a network, or he's built up these sort of different facets of his skill set. So what happens is if you accept everything, you're closing the door potentially to things that are really going to get you far.
yeah,
But then if you don't know where you're going or what you want to achieve, then you probably will do that. You'll probably just accept everything on all that's landed to you. And again, you're fighting an old mental model which says, look, you have to do this. If
you
you
have to
if
work
you
hard to get anywhere,
yeah,
sort of
but yeah,
thing.
and you do. Every successful person I've met has worked hard.
Yeah.
The idea that you can just coast it. Well, actually, that's not true. I mean, some people, a
Are you
minority of
gonna
people.
name drop?
No, I'm not. But you can see it. A minority of people get far by just blagging it.
Mm,
They don't necessarily have the skills or competence, but they might be very good at certain things, and they get very far with a lesser level of competency. But most successful people I've met have worked incredibly hard, and they are very good at handling stress, and they're very good at handling being uncomfortable all the time
mm,
because they're making such big calls, and they're huge amounts are riding on the decisions that they make. So there is that aspect of it, but particularly in the early parts of your career, you have to, I think, be selective as to what you say yes to, if
yeah,
you can. Your situation may be one that, because of a number of factors, including financial, you can't say no to some things, but you can. You don't have to accept everything. I don't think there's a single person out there who is in a position where if they say no to one or two things, something disastrous is going to happen. But in your head, you might think, "Oh my god, this is gonna turn out so badly."
Because you feel like you're swimming upstream all
Yeah,
of a sudden. It's so against your what, the
your wiring.
exactly. So, but I think although we're, talking about working hard, I think you do have to work hard, like you said, but you also, as you said, have to be selective. And I think that's where working smart comes in.
Yeah,
So it's not like you're not turning up. It's not like you're putting your best
yeah, you got to
version
show
of
up.
yourself
Yeah,
forward. It's that you're doing that, but you're doing it for the items or the projects that will bring you closer to your end goal of where you want to be in the future, where you see yourself in the future. So actually reflecting on that is so important. And when you're younger, you don't necessarily know that, but I think just a small kind of inclination of, well, I actually want to be a better communicator, or
yeah,
I'd love to be able to present. You don't necessarily have to say, I want to be the CEO of X company, but you do want to know, at least at the beginning, what are the specific skill sets or things that are going to serve
yeah,
you
yeah.
later.
But also on that point, I think if you're given something and it adds to your skill set, no matter how seemingly crappy it is,
Yeah.
that's a good thing
Mhm.
because it helps you grow, and the accumulation of skills over time is a really good thing. So if like for example, like the early parts of my career, I thought, what is this training? I don't need this training. It's not going to achieve much for me. But looking back on it, I wish I'd taken every training opportunity I could
Absolutely. Yeah.
because that is really investing in yourself.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier hit the nail on the head for me, which was, you want to have knowledge and as much of it as possible to feel like you have a sense of belonging. So for me, knowledge and learning has been a lifelong, passion of mine where it doesn't matter what it is. I actually just want to learn how it works. And actually, some of the leaders that I've had the pleasure of working alongside, the ones that did those smaller training sessions and things from like really, I don't know, really small things to really big things that make a big impact sort of thing. Like from typing courses to learning how to put together a massive strategy or whatever. Actually, the ones that have done those courses, they're the ones that exercise the most amount of empathy I've
Yeah,
found, because they know
yeah,
what amount of work goes into it. But I think we have talked about our younger selves and the sorts of advice we would give ourselves, etc. And we've talked about, putting um, putting a sense of your purpose at the forefront of your
yeah,
decision making, and how you can be selective about, moving towards your goals, etc. But I think it's that thing about also taking risk and being able to do that, because
yeah,
as you say, in your 20s, I mean, you may still have that risk where you don't want to put yourself out there to kind of risk your
yeah,
your livelihood, in
yeah.
essence.
But the thing is that your 20s is the perfect time
That's the
to take the
time.
risks.
That's the time. What are some of the points that we've really raised here? I think when it comes to conforming or masking, the one of the biggest things that we've really touched on is, how can you really bring yourself to the workplace and bring all of you to the workplace, so that you're able to celebrate everything you have to bring, and actually the organization can also reap the benefits of that. But how do you balance that and keep that in check, so that you are also a team player and you're conforming to the norms of what that organization sort of expects from you. So it's a real balancing act, and I think the only way of being able to do that appropriately is if you have a real sense of purpose of, where are you trying to get to? What's the trajectory of your goal look like? Where are you trying to reach towards? And even if you don't have all of the answers, it's sort of, small steps, even small stepping stones. So at least you have a justifiable way of saying, actually, I'm trying to grow towards here. That's where the sun's shining for me, and I'm heading that way. Whereas, you can kind of almost practice the 80-20 rule when it comes to certain projects that aren't necessarily going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
bring you towards the direction that you want it to take. And I think, just to sum it all up, guys, your 20s, when you're first
Magical
starting out,
time.
that's the time to really have a go at trying to be you, because can you imagine wearing that mask on for another 40 years when the pressures and responsibilities have grown, and you're still trying to be this person that isn't really all of you? you're going to be so exhausted by that stage, and it's going to be harder to maintain. So something catastrophic
Something has to give.
could happen.
Yeah.
So, I think take a chance, do the thing that's right by you. Bear in mind that there is a balance to be had when it comes to fitting in and playing the game, etc. And take a chance in your 20s to try and find that place that's going to give you that opportunity.
Yeah. Fantastic. So that's been a really insightful discussion. I think in the next episode, we're going to discuss the potential impact in your later career if you don't deal with the issues that we've raised, and how, if possible, you can bring it back on track.
You've been listening to the Your Day, Your Rules podcast with Sev and Michael.
Before we go, we'd like to say a big thank you to all of our listeners and for sharing our content with someone who needs it.
Keep spreading the word and remember to like, subscribe and follow us here and on our socials.
Until next time, if you want to go fast, go alone.
If you want to go far, go together.